Hey, what's up? When you look at the last 50 years of economic data, it doesn't exactly paint a rosy picture, does it? For so many people, it just feels like things are heading in the wrong direction. And a huge piece of that puzzle is the fact that wages have been completely left in the dust.
And this chart right here just lays it all out crystal clear. Since the early 70s, our productivity, how much stuff we can make and how efficiently we can do it, has gone through the roof. It's skyrocketed. But the pay for the average worker, well, you can see for yourself. It's basically flatlined. All this incredible new wealth we're creating just isn't making its way to the people doing the work. So where's it all going?
Well, here's your answer. It's going right to the very, very top. Inequality has exploded to levels we haven't seen in a century. I mean, just try to wrap your head around this number. For the first time since the Gilded Age, the top 0.1%, a tiny, tiny slice of the population, now has more wealth than the entire bottom 90% of Americans. It's just a staggering amount of money concentrated in a few hands.
Okay, so here's where it gets really interesting. When you take all these charts, wages going nowhere, inequality going through the roof, debt soaring, and you put them side by side, you notice something really weird. They all seem to break, to take a sharp, dramatic turn at almost the exact same time. It just forces you to ask, what in the world happened in 1971?
That one question leads a lot of people to a single moment. One televised address that many see as the precise dividing line in modern history. The moment the so-called golden age of capitalism came to a screeching halt.
And that address came from President Richard Nixon. On a Sunday night in August 1971, he went on TV and announced that the U.S. was going to temporarily stop converting dollars into gold. Spoiler alert, it wasn't temporary. This was it. This was the final nail in the coffin for the gold standard.
And this single event created a very simple, very powerful story. The story goes something like this. Before 1971, money was real. It was backed by shiny gold bars, the economy was fair, and life was good. But after 1971, money became fake monopoly money. And that's when it all went downhill, leading us to the mess we're in today.
It's a really clean, tidy explanation, right? It explains everything in one go. But is it really that simple? Can we really blame all of our modern economic woes on this one decision? I think if we stop there, we're actually missing a much bigger and, frankly, a much more fascinating story. So to get to that real story, we have to ask why Nixon did this. And the answer has less to do with some grand economic theory and a whole lot more to do with high-stakes geopolitics. And honestly, it was basically about sticking it to the French. All right, so for this we need a quick history lesson. Let's rewind to 1944, to the Bretton Woods Agreement. World War II was ending, and the world leaders got together to design a whole new financial system from scratch. The main goal was to create stability, to get everyone trading with each other, because they figured, hey, if our economies are all tied together, maybe we'll stop trying to blow each other up. And here's the nuts and bolts of how it worked. All the other major countries tied their currency to the US dollar at a fixed rate, and the US dollar, in turn, was tied to gold. But, and this is the important part, only other governments, other central banks could swap their dollars for gold. Regular people couldn't do it. It was really more of a big boy accounting system than a true gold standard for you and me. Now, you can probably see how this gave the United States a pretty sweet deal. An extraordinary privilege, as the French President Charles de Gaulle called it. America could literally print green pieces of paper for a few cents, and the rest of the world had to treat them as if they were as good as gold. De Gaulle, well, he was not a fan. So what did he do? He decided to call America's bluff. He started sending planes full of dollars back to the US and demanding gold in return, which was totally within his rights. His successor even sent a literal battleship into New York Harbor to pick up a gold shipment. Talk about making a point.
And this little stunt exposed the system's fatal flaw. See, because of massive spending on things like the Vietnam War, the U.S. had printed way more dollars than it actually had gold in Fort Knox to back them up. It was like they'd been writing checks that their gold account couldn't cash. Nixon had to slam the gold window shut because, well, the vault was about to be empty.
Okay, so if ending the gold standard was really more about a geopolitical spat and preventing a bank run, then what actually caused those huge economic shifts we saw in the charts earlier? Well, for that, a growing number of economists say we need to look past 1971 and turn our attention to the 1980s. So this gives us two competing suspects in our economic mystery. The popular theory blames it all on 1971 and the end of gold.
But this other theory points the finger at a whole wave of policies that came in during the 1980s under leaders like Ronald Reagan in the US and Margaret Thatcher in the UK.
And this was a full-blown policy revolution. We're talking about a complete change in economic philosophy. They cut taxes way down for the wealthiest. They slashed regulations on businesses. They started selling off public industries. They cracked down hard on labor unions. And, this is a big one, they pretty much stopped enforcing anti-monopoly laws.
And to give you an idea of how big a deal that last point is, get this. The last time the United States government successfully broke up a major company for being a monopoly was AT&T, way back in 1982. That's it. Since then, companies have just gotten bigger and more powerful, with less competition.
And when you look at the timeline, the 1980s theory gets really compelling. Look, Nixon slams the gold window shut here in '71, but the big Reagan-Thatcher policy changes don't really get going until the early '80s. And then what happens? Boom. Right here in the mid-'80s, that's when you see those charts on inequality and wages just go vertical. The timing lines up almost perfectly.
So which one is it? Is 1971 the villain, or is it the 1980s? Well, the truth, as it usually is a little more complicated. To really get the full picture, we need to zoom out a bit and talk about a little math and a really useful metaphor.
So first, the math. It turns out there's a kind of mathematical illusion that makes 1971 look like the smoking gun for everything. And it all comes down to the weird way that compounding growth looks on a chart. See, most of these economic charts start right after World War II, and they show exponential growth. Anything that grows like that will eventually create a hockey stick shape. It's flat for a while, and then it just shoots up. And if you start your graph in the 1940s, that sharp upward bend mathematically lands, you guessed it, right around the 1970s. This is true for good things, like GDP, and bad things, like inequality.
So what's the best way to think about what happened in '71? Well, here's that metaphor. Ending the gold standard was like taking the training wheels off the economy's bicycle. It didn't cause a crash, but it allowed the whole system to go much, much faster. That meant we could have faster growth, sure, but it also meant that when we made mistakes, the crashes could be a whole lot bigger.
And that really brings us to where we are now. The decision in 1971 took the training wheels off. The policies of the 1980s grabbed the handlebars, steered us in a certain direction, and started pedaling like mad. So the real question for us today is, after 50 years flying without those training wheels, have we actually learned how to ride this thing?